They called me the perfect wife, polished, poised, and permanently unemployed. My resume collected dust while my in-laws sipped champagne, celebrating the good girl who gave up Wall Street for a white picket fence. What they didn't know was, I never stopped building. Behind every forced smile at their family brunches, I was coding models, cracking markets, and hiding billions in plain sight. The same company they used to blacklist me, I now own it in silence. But this isn't a comeback story. It's a controlled detonation, and when the smoke clears, only one name will remain. When I first arrived at the Pierce estate, everything shimmered. The chandelier in the foyer, the polished marble floors, even Judith's perfectly staged smile. Everything exuded luxury and quiet control. Eric, my husband, walked 2 steps behind her. Like a boy who'd never really outgrown the habit of following his mother's lead, I told myself this was temporary, that I'd sacrificed a high-rise office and 7-figure bonuses for love, that I could pause my ambition for a family. I lied to myself better than anyone else could. Judith welcomed me with kisses on the cheek and tight embraces that lingered half a second too long. Our golden girl, she'd coo at country club luncheons, the beauty who traded finance for family. Her friends would smile, women with pearls and husbands on boards, then glance at each other as if sharing a private joke. I laughed along, pretending not to notice. At night, while Eric fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling and rehearsed numbers in my head. It was the only way to quiet the ache. EBITDA margins, compound growth, currency hedges, terms that once ruled my world but had become forbidden in this house. I tried for months to fit their mold. I hosted dinner parties, joined charity galas, wore beige cashmere that cost more than my old rent. But something in me started to rot. Judith's compliments became instructions. Smile more, Lauren. Less lipstick, dear. It's unbecoming in our circles. Monica, Eric's sister, never bothered with pleasantries. She once whispered at brunch, "Funny how someone so smart always needs rescuing." I wanted to respond, but I knew how this family worked. You don't fight back. You become irrelevant. The day I decided to re-enter the workforce, I did it quietly. Sent resumes under my maiden name, created a new email, scrubbed my LinkedIn of anything that linked me to the Pierce name. I interviewed for a data analysis role at a mid-sized firm in Atlanta. Nothing flashy, just a starting point. The interview went well. They promised a follow-up. It never came. Then it happened again and again. Polite refusals, vague excuses. One HR manager finally broke script and told me off the record. Someone had called them directly, questioning my mental stability. Another recruiter received a legal-sounding email from someone claiming I had violated NDA agreements with my former firm. All false. All traceable, back to the same IP range. I confronted Eric, gently at first. "Did your mother ever mention anything about my job hunt?" He blinked at me like a child caught with crumbs on his face. "She's just looking out for you," he said. "She thinks the stress isn't worth it." "She's sabotaging my career," I snapped. "She's protecting the family name." And just like that, I saw it clearly. Judith didn't think I was a threat. She knew I was. And she was dismantling me one opportunity at a time. I dug deeper, opened a spreadsheet and mapped every rejection email, cross-referenced names, timestamps, and domains. The pattern was sickening. My in-laws were orchestrating a silent blacklist campaign. But what gutted me most wasn't the sabotage. It was Eric's silence. He knew. He had always known. Monica was no better. When a story surfaced on a gossip forum claiming I'd stolen proprietary data from my old employer, I knew exactly whose writing style it mirrored. The syntax, the phrasing. Too clean to be amateur, too targeted to be random. The post was pulled, but not before it reached hundreds of eyes in my old circle. One evening I walked into Judith's sunroom. She sat with a glass of Chardonnay bathed in sunset. "I know what you're doing," I said, calm, even. She didn't look up. "You're a bright girl, Lauren. But bright girls don't always belong in boardrooms. Sometimes they belong in pretty homes with powerful husbands. I smiled. And sometimes they build empires behind velvet curtains. She raised an eyebrow. Is that a threat? No, I said. It's a forecast. And then I left. I created her on a Tuesday at 3 a.m., sitting at the kitchen island under the dull hum of the pendant light. Her name was Mara Lynn. Born in Boston, educated abroad, no social media presence, and a resume so polished it gleamed. She didn't exist, but every credential she claimed, I had earned. Mara applied for a junior data entry role at a small fintech startup called CipherNest. The salary was insulting. The title was beneath me, and it was perfect. The onboarding was remote. No face-to-face, just forms, logins, NDAs. I sent a blurry photo of an ID cropped tight, my hair dyed, head tilted just enough to evade recognition. It worked. In less than a week, Mara Lynn became a low-priority node in CipherNest's system. Forgotten, overlooked, underestimated, which gave me exactly what I needed. The company's internal dashboards were clunky, held together by duct tape and ambition. Their data pipeline was chaotic, their projections built on generic templates. But underneath that chaos was raw, untapped potential. I spent days rewriting scripts, cleaning data sets, and quietly testing out a model I'd been developing for months, a machine learning tool that could predict consumer lending risk with over 90% accuracy. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't wait for applause. I just built. By week 3, the COO pinged the company-wide Slack. Someone's updated the predictive loan approval module, and it's brilliant. Who did this? I didn't answer. The CEO followed up. Seriously, who's Mara Lynn? Still, I said nothing. Let the mystery ferment. Within 2 months, CipherNest was using my model in their investor pitch decks. By the end of the quarter, they secured $3 million in seed funding from a venture capital firm that had previously ghosted them. At the next town hall, the CEO toasted to anonymous genius. I sipped tea in my living room and muted the call before anyone could ask questions. Promotions came. First to data analyst, then to technical strategist. Each time I accepted through email, never video. I blamed camera anxiety, and people didn't push. The world was used to remote ghosts by now. At night, I tracked Judith's movements. She joined a philanthropy board, mostly to network with the city's elite. Monica was back on television, hosting a finance talk show that recycled the same economic fluff every week. Eric had stopped trying. He sent me the occasional text, "Thinking of you." I never replied. Mara Lynn became more than an identity. She became a shield. And through her, I learned how far I could go when no one could see me coming. Then came the meeting request that changed everything. It was from Seraph Capital, one of the fastest-growing private equity firms in the region. They wanted CipherNest's team to present our AI capabilities. But not just the tech. They wanted a strategic roadmap, and they specifically requested the input of Mara Lynn. I froze. Seraph Capital wasn't just a major player. They were quietly positioning themselves to acquire mid-sized fintech firms, and they were in talks with the Pierce family's investment arm. The room was tightening. I crafted a plan. For the first time, I scheduled a Zoom call. But when the camera turned on, it wasn't my face. It was a hyper-realistic deepfake of a Korean-American woman in her 30s, generic enough to pass, dynamic enough to distract. I used voice modulation software to soften my tone. The pitch was flawless. Seraph was impressed. The call ended with an invitation to consult, independent of CipherNest. It was bait. I took it. Weeks later, I was secretly contracted to analyze Seraph's potential acquisitions. One of them, a boutique lending firm partially owned by Judith's trust. My analysis buried it. Exposed its inflated valuations, weak compliance, and shady offshore partnerships. The acquisition was canceled. Judith lost face, and several million. CipherNest's CEO never knew why Seraph pulled out. Judith never knew who dismantled her asset from the inside. And Eric? He sent another text. You doing okay? I deleted it. Judith always prided herself on knowing the landscape before anyone else. She moved like a queen on a chessboard, knocking down pawns before they even saw her coming. So when she learned that Cyphernest had outbid Pierce Holdings on a critical municipal lending contract, she did what any woman of her breed would. She ordered a buyout. Her lawyers drafted the approach, a generous acquisition offer laced with terms that would hollow out the company from the inside. She didn't know who was behind Cyphernest's sudden growth, but she knew it needed to be neutralized. The board at Cyphernest received the offer with forced politeness and private laughter. The CEO saw through it instantly, but the legal team was intrigued. It wasn't every day that a family like the Pierces came knocking. Still, something felt off. The company wasn't ready to sell. They had just gained traction, capital, and tech no one else had. So they turned to me. Mara, the CEO said over a secured call, we need our strategist in the room. No filters, no aliases. The board wants to meet you. In person. I hesitated. This was the moment I'd been preparing for and dreading. Every mask I'd worn, every email sent under a false name, every algorithm coded in silence. This would unravel it all. But the truth was, they trusted me more than anyone else, and they deserved to know who they were betting on. I walked into that boardroom wearing a navy suit I hadn't touched in years. Hair tied back, no jewelry, no armor. Just me. There were gasps. Then silence. The CEO leaned back slowly and said, well, that explains a lot. I laid out the entire roadmap. The projections, the AI engine, the risk flags. I showed them how we had outmaneuvered Pierce Holdings 3 times in the past quarter, without them even noticing. Then I looked each board member in the eye. If you accept Judith Pierce's offer, I said, you're not just selling a company. You're selling your future to the very institution this tech was built to disrupt. No one moved. They didn't need to. The answer was already clear. The offer was rejected. Judith didn't take the refusal well. For a woman used to owning rooms before she entered them, being denied by a nameless startup felt like treason. But when she learned who had turned her down, her fury metastasized into something darker. I expected retaliation. What I didn't expect was how low she'd go. The first hit came via an anonymous blog post titled, Ex-Finance Executive Fired for Embezzlement Now Advising Startups. It was seeded with half-truths and fabricated emails. The second was more invasive, leaked therapy records, falsified, of course, suggesting I'd suffered a breakdown after losing my job in New York. I hadn't. I'd left voluntarily. But the lie was stickier than the truth. Then came Monica's contribution. A source leaked to a gossip site that I had terminated a pregnancy during my climb at my previous firm. The headline was brutal, sleeping her way to the top, the CEO's dirty past. The article spread like wildfire. By morning, my inbox was a war zone of threats, insults, and unsolicited advice. Eric said nothing. Not privately, not publicly, not even a text. He'd chosen his side. Cyphernest's board called an emergency session, not to fire me, but to protect me. They offered a PR firm, legal support, even time off. I declined everything except one request. Let me speak, I told them. The next day, I recorded a video, no edits, no filters. My name is Lauren Pierce, I began. I built models that protect borrowers from predatory lending. I designed tools that help startups grow without selling their soul. I've worked in the shadows for 2 years, not because I was ashamed, but because I was hunted. I paused, and now you know why. The video went viral. Within 48 hours, news outlets picked it up. The gossip sites issued retractions. Cyphernest's user base grew by 11%. Investors called us brave. Women called me their voice. But in private, I was crumbling. I watched the clip again that night, just once, and then closed my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there knowing that the worst part wasn't what they said. It was that he didn't defend me. I had 2 choices. Bury the story or burn it all down. Silence had served me once, but now it was a leash. And every second I stayed quiet, they tightened the grip. Judith thought she could win with whispers and shadows. I decided it was time to flip the lights on. At exactly 8 p.m. on a Thursday, I went live. No makeup, no PR script, just me sitting at my desk, the backdrop of my small apartment behind me. The caption read, "Let's talk about the truth." Within minutes, thousands tuned in. I started with the documents, emails I'd archived, timelines I'd mapped, conversations I'd transcribed from my own encrypted call logs. I walked viewers through every job offer that vanished, every lie planted, every barrier constructed to keep me locked inside the golden cage. And then I showed them the source trail, Judith's fake HR aliases, the metadata, the IP overlaps, Monica's sock puppet accounts traced back to family Wi-Fi, cold facts, no accusations, just evidence. Next came the scandals. The so-called embezzlement story? Fabricated. I had the signed HR documents proving my resignation from my old firm. The falsified therapy records? I filed a lawsuit against the fake clinic that sold them. And the pregnancy rumor. I didn't deny it. I didn't have to. "This is the part where you expect me to say I'm ashamed," I said into the camera. But I'm not. I made my choices and I live with them. What I won't do is apologize for being ambitious in a world that punishes women for wanting more. By the time the stream ended, over 400,000 people had watched. Hashtags erupted. "You Dark Horse CEO." "We stand with Lauren." "Gold cage broken." Influencers reposted. Analysts rewrote. CipherNest's public traffic surged, and so did our valuation. The very company they tried to keep me from had just been revalued at $40 million, and now their biggest problem wasn't me. It was how to get close to me again. The fallout was swift. Judith released a public statement denying everything, claiming she was being targeted by a disgruntled former family member. Monica went dark on social media. Eric finally sent me a message. "Proud of you." 3 words. A bandage thrown on a bullet wound. But I had bigger things to handle. Behind the scenes, CipherNest began receiving offers, not buyouts this time, but partnerships. The most surprising came from within Pierce Holdings themselves. Their lending tech was outdated, their growth plateaued, and their PR department was drowning in backlash. They proposed a merger, a desperate attempt to align themselves with something fresh, untainted and future-ready. I didn't reject them, not outright. Instead, I made a counter-proposal, full operational independence for CipherNest, 0 dilution of our tech team, and a seat on their board for one of our advisors. It was a bold ask, but what they didn't know was that their CEO was already under investigation. Whispers of past financial misreporting were surfacing. A trail of internal memos had leaked, hinting at stock manipulation dating back years. The board, once loyal, was fracturing. And then came the spark that lit the fuse. An anonymous file landed in the inbox of the SEC, a voice recording of Judith Pierce coercing the Pierce Holdings CEO to falsify performance reports for a pending investor deal. Her voice was unmistakable, sharp, deliberate, dripping with entitlement. I heard it before it broke, because Eric sent it to me. "I'm done standing behind her," he wrote. "This is your move now." For the first time in months, I didn't feel anger toward him, just clarity. Maybe he hadn't been brave when I needed him. Maybe he'd chosen the safe silence too many times, but this was real. With the tape in hand, the board voted. The CEO was suspended pending investigation. Judith was stripped of her title and forcibly removed from the board. It was the first time in 30 years a Pierce had been pushed out of their own empire. I attended the next board meeting in person. Heads turned when I walked in. No longer Mara Lynn, no longer the faceless strategist. I was Lauren Pierce, and I was sitting at the table they once built to keep people like me out. The meeting was short, the vote unanimous. CipherNest would remain autonomous, and I would serve as strategic advisor to Pierce Holdings for 1 year, on my terms, at my rate, and with complete oversight of their tech initiatives. When it was over, I didn't linger. As I walked past the hallway of framed portraits, Pierce's in oil and gold, I caught a reflection in the glass. Judith stood at the far end of the corridor, watching me. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. She knew the code had collapsed. The dominoes had fallen. The headlines arrived like confetti, loud, blinding, impossible to ignore. Cyphernest's dark horse, now CEO of Pierce Holdings, the youngest CEO in company history. From housewife to powerhouse, Lauren Pierce's meteoric rise. It felt like victory. I wore the title like armor, CEO. The boardroom bowed, the stock ticked upward, and the empire once built to exclude me now moved to my rhythm. For the first time, my name didn't trail behind someone else's legacy. It stood alone, whole, sharp. But power doesn't come clean. It comes wrapped in expectations, surveillance, and blood. 3 months in, the cracks started showing. The Wall Street Journal published an exposé titled "Ghost in the System, the CEO Who Faked Her Identity." It was a hit piece, expertly timed. They laid out everything: Mara Lynn, the AI model, the deepfake video, even the anonymous advisory contracts. There was no lie in the article, just selective truth, sharpened into accusation. What else has she hidden? Is she even legally qualified to lead? Can we trust someone who built her empire on deception? Investors panicked. Analysts questioned my ethics. Former allies ghosted. Internal morale split. Half the team idolized me. The other half feared the fallout. Board meetings went from supportive to surgical. Every decision I made was dissected, recorded, and leaked within hours. I barely slept. My inbox turned into a battleground. My legal team camped in my office. Crisis management became my full-time job. I stopped coding. I stopped thinking. I only reacted. And then Monica called. "It's time," she said. "We should talk." The last time Monica had spoken to me, it was through slander and silence. Now she appeared at the office dressed in muted tones, eyes softer, voice low. She said she wanted to make amends. She said she believed in the future I was building, that she was tired of Judith's games and wanted out of the old system. "I know people. I can handle the media. Let me clean this up." I didn't trust her, but I wanted to. I brought her in, carefully, with limited access, under monitored conditions. She handled a few press pieces, softened some headlines, rebuilt parts of the company's image. The shift was immediate. Optics improved. Social media sentiment trended upward. Our valuation began to recover. I told myself it was strategy. It was a mistake. 1 month later, our security team flagged an anomaly, a breach. Small at first, just marketing data. Then customer information, names, emails, behavioral metrics. At first, we thought it was an external attack. Then the audit traced the breach to a single terminal, Monica's. I confronted her in my office, the doors closed, blinds drawn. She didn't deny it. "Judith made me an offer," she said. "She's buying back shares through proxy firms. She's building a block strong enough to vote you out." I stared at her, numb. "She promised me your job, said I could be the rebranding the company needs after you implode." "And you believed her?" "She's never lost before." I pressed the panic button. Security escorted her out before she could say another word, but the damage was done. The breach went public. Trust wavered. Journalists returned, this time with a vengeance. And then came Judith's move, a full-page ad in the New York Times. "Leadership demands integrity. We stand for accountability." Below it, a chart comparing my ethical violations to traditional corporate standards. A quote, "Some inherit legacies, others falsify them." No name, no signature, but everyone knew who paid for it. That same week, my assistant forwarded me a leaked email chain from one of the board's most conservative members. Judith had contacted him directly, offering strategic support in exchange for votes. Her new fund, cloaked in a generic name, had quietly purchased 9% of Pierce Holdings. The game was rigged, again. I called Eric. "She's coming back," I told him. "She wants the chair." "I know." There was a long silence. "I warned her," he said. "Told her you wouldn't go down easy. And yet here we are. I can help." I didn't answer, because help from Eric had always come late. This was no longer about vengeance. It was about survival. I prepared for war. I built my case. Every breach, every email, every manipulation. I compiled timelines, phone records, internal memos. I hired forensic auditors to follow the money trail from Judith's shelf fund back to her personal trust. I filed a motion to freeze her voting rights pending investigation, but it was too late. The shareholders' meeting loomed. Judith had allies, money, influence. She didn't need the truth. She needed doubt. And in the world of legacy and perception, doubt was enough. The night before the vote, I sat alone in the same boardroom where I once felt invincible. The lights dimmed. The glass reflected a tired woman with sharp eyes and shaking hands. I had built everything from ashes, and now the fire was back. The boardroom was full. Cameras lined the back wall. Shareholders filled every seat, and behind the double glass doors, press waited with microphones like weapons. I stood at the center of it all, poised, silent, ready. I didn't bring lawyers. I didn't bring advisors. Just a tablet in my hand and everything they didn't want the world to see. "Before we vote," I said, "you deserve to know who's really been running this company." I tapped the screen. The projection began. Audio recordings, emails, financial trails. Judith's voice manipulating board members. Monica's access logs cross-referenced with client data leaks. The former CEO's financial discrepancies traced back to hush funds and phantom accounts. The room shifted from breathless to buzzing. Screens lit up. Phones rang. The chairperson called for order, but no one could look away. "I'm not here to beg for my position," I said. "I'm here to resign." Gasps rippled. I kept going. I built something powerful but not invincible. And if leadership demands anything, it's the humility to know when to let go. Not because I've lost, but because I've won enough to change the rules. I laid out a new structure, one I'd designed in secret, a flattened hierarchy that redistributed authority to department heads, a voting system where employees, not just shareholders, held influence, bonuses tied to ethics metrics, a whistleblower pipeline that bypassed the executive chain, a company run by integrity, not inheritance. By the end, the room was standing. I left before the applause. That night, headlines didn't say, "Lauren Pierce ousted." They read, "CEO walks away with her own terms," and "The woman who burned the ladder so others could climb." The backlash Judith had counted on never arrived. The power vacuum she hoped to fill collapsed around her. Within weeks, the SEC opened a formal investigation. Her fund's voting rights were frozen, her proxy firms exposed. The press turned on her like wolves. Monica, cornered and panicking, cut a deal. But it wasn't enough. She was indicted on multiple counts of corporate espionage and data fraud, sentenced to 4 years. She cried on camera. No one clapped. Judith refused interviews, sold off her assets piece by piece. By winter, she had relinquished the last of her shares in Pierce Holdings. For the first time since the company's inception, there were no Pierces left in the boardroom, except for one. 1 year passed. Eric opened a law firm, small, focused, specializing in corporate manipulation and whistleblower protection. His name carried weight, but not just because of his family. He'd built something that stood on its own, and in doing so, found peace with what he hadn't done soon enough. We didn't get back together. We didn't need to. Some distances aren't built from anger. They're built from evolution. I moved out of the city, rented a space in a quiet neighborhood, converted it into a school. No tuition, no dress code, just desks, light, and the language of capital made simple for women who had once been silenced. Some of them came with babies on their hips, others with court papers in their bags, but every one of them brought something unbreakable: hunger. And that was enough. We taught them how to open accounts, how to read balance sheets, how to walk into a room and not flinch when asked to justify their worth. We taught them negotiation, leverage, strategy, not because they wanted power, but because they'd had enough of begging for permission. One afternoon, I stood in front of our largest class to date, 64 women from 12 cities, each with a story, each with fire behind their eyes. Someone asked, "Do you regret any of it? The war, the family, the fall?" I smiled, not out of pride, but out of something quieter, something earned. "No," I said, "because I wasn't born to win. I was born to rebuild what others broke." The room went still, then applause, then silence again as they took in the weight of the words, not as inspiration, but as blueprint. Outside, the world moved on, but inside that classroom, in that moment, I saw a new empire forming, not one with shareholders and suits, but with scars and steel and women who'd learned how to stand.